Welcome to another edition of I'm Not Running for Congress. I'm your host, Don Baisley. Thanks for joining us again. It's been a while since I've done an episode. I got a little busy with retirement and settling into retirement. Since we did the last episode, a lot has happened. The primaries have been figured out. In Congressional District 23, there will be a primary in the Democratic Party, and that will be between Aaron Gies and Kevin Stocker. On the Republican side, there will not be a primary. We had Jim King, who was running for the Republican seat on episode number 2. I believe Jim may be running a write-in campaign. I'm not quite sure about that. If so, we will follow up with him and find out what he's up to and what's happening on the Republican side. In the meantime, we're going to turn back to the Democratic side. And today joining us is Kevin Stocker, who's a candidate for Congress in New York District 23. Kevin, welcome to I'm Not Running for Congress. How are you?
Don, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Well, to start with, as we do with all the guests, we want to start in a concise way. Don't take more than a minute or two, but tell us who Kevin Stocker is. Tell us a little bit briefly about your history and why we're speaking here today. Why are you running for Congress?
Well, let's start with the why. When I was doing town halls and traveled throughout the 23rd District, quite a bit in the southern tier, NPR called me one day as I was in the truck, and they asked that exact same question. And I said to them, well, I don't recognize the country that we currently live in. I said, how I was raised, how I was educated, what used to be right is now wrong, and what used to be wrong is now right, and the country's upside down. I look at this race way differently. I look at the country differently. I see Rome is burning, and I think we have to be aggressive and stand up, and we need Democrats want a fighter. They want somebody who's going to lead and change the course this country's going in. We are fighting to save America, and also about this campaign is fighting for hardworking families that are having a hard time with the cost of living, whether it's groceries, utilities, gas prices, housing, healthcare. They want somebody who's not just a talker. They want a fighter, somebody that does something. And I think that's my best track record. I've lived in this area 35 years as an attorney, fighting against insurance companies, taking on some of the biggest cases, Western New York, whether it's Tonawanda Coke, whether it's Amagon Crematory, the city of Buffalo, or unfortunately taking on the Catholic Church to protect children from harm. I have a proven track record of getting things done.
Good. And I'm curious, you launched your campaign, I believe, in January, sometime this winter, right? So it's been several months, 5 or 6 months.
I think I go back, my first town hall was Tioga. I think it was April or May that we did that. So we've been on the road for about a year now, longer. We're going into June.
And I know that, this district, part of why I'm very interested in following the race in this district is that the Cook Political Report, for instance, is calling this a safe seat for the Republicans to hold on to.
Allegedly.
A safe seat for Nick Langworthy. That's what they're saying. And I'm wondering, you've been out there for now over a year in the district, right? What are you seeing? I mean, the analysts and pundits are telling us it's a Republican district. There's no way anyone else is going to win. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing out there?
It is a red district, but when you see Marjorie Greene start to flip, when you see Texas, Mississippi, Georgia start to flip, I point to Kathy Hochul ran for this, and she won in this similar district. It was a red district. The issues are similar to back then when Republicans are cutting Social Security. We need somebody to fight not only to save Social Security, but I believe increase Social Security with the cost of living that is going on in this day and age, cost of groceries, cost of taxes. I think seniors need more of a helping hand. I point to Kathy Hochul. She was able to win this district. With all the houses that have gone door to door, I collected about 500 signatures myself. That is not an easy accomplishment. Jim King found that out. When you're going door to door, sub-freezing temperatures, blinding snowstorms, rain, it's a miserable experience. Professor Geese only got 40 signatures himself. So more than 10 times that effort. That is not an easy thing. But when you pay voters respect, listen to their concerns, and earn their trust, that's the best way to do it. I found going door to door is very important. It's very effective. Earn their trust. And the town halls would be the second most important. But I do believe the district can be flipped blue. And I think if I'm fortunate enough to earn the trust of the Democrats who want a fighter, I'm looking forward to talk to those Republicans and independents. All the doors that I've already done, I've already met people. Some people even came to my town halls that were Republicans and independents, and they told me they're going to vote Democrat this year. So I know it's out there. They know Nick Langworthy betrayed his constituents. He's afraid to do town halls in person. He does not return their phone calls. He's already showing signs of going into the bunker. I do believe as we get closer to November, he collapses due to the pressure and the anger that's out there. The big, beautiful bill and all the cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, veterans benefits, education, health care. People are upset.
I want to talk to you more about that process of being out on the ground throughout the district over the past year or so. You did mention the professor, and I want to be clear. You're referring there, I assume, to Aaron Gies, who's the candidate who's running for this seat. Is that accurate?
I am. And sometimes I've heard his name pronounced differently multiple times. So if you say it's correctly pronounced Gies, then I would say Aaron Gies, Professor Gies. It's like talking to a doctor. You refer to the person as a doctor, and he's earned a certain status, being a PhD and a professor. So sometimes I refer to him as professor. But yes, that's who I.
You talked about, or you mentioned the effort of getting the signatures, and I've kind of been involved in politics a lot, and I know when that season comes around, it's very hard work to do.
It is.
You need thousands of signatures, 1,500, 1,600, whatever.
Right.
And I'm kind of wondering about, part of what I'm doing with this is learning also about what it's like to run. That's why I'm calling it I'm Not Running for Congress, because you are. So,
right.
And I'm kind of wondering, what is the process like when you start to run? You announce your candidacy. Is it required that you go and meet with all the county chairs? Like, what's the relationship between the counties throughout the district and your campaign? Like, what happens there?
Well, that's an interesting question. It depends on who you are as a person and the type of elected official you want to be. Now, the example I give to people is if you want to cozy up to party bosses and give money like Professor Gies has done to the party bosses, you might be a certain type of elected official that just goes along with what the party bosses want and not fight on behalf of people. The example I give to people all the time is Tonawanda in my area. When I ran previously, Tonawanda was emitting toxins in the air and giving my community cancer, multiple forms of cancer, MS, and leukemia. When I ran, I did a negative campaign piece about political donations that millions of dollars they were giving to both sides of the aisle, from the highest party boss all the way to Congress, all the way down to our local mayors and supervisors. When I did that piece disclosing this is all the money that's going on, and you have elected officials turning your back so that this company can give cancer to our community, the party bosses wanted to take me to the woodshed. They said, you can't talk about stuff like this. They give us too much money. It was that moment many years ago that I realized I had to be independent, because they were asking me to take money from a corrupt company like that and let how I look at it, my teammates get cancer. I always refer to the voters as the boss. They're the boss. They tell me what they want to fight for, and it'd be my honor to fight on their behalf. So when you're running the campaign, do you go for just the party bosses' approval, or do you advance and listen to what the voters want? So in this particular race, I think half the party bosses are smart, because one of the big issues that's come up in the town halls, they were so upset, we're talking about Democrats, that they didn't have a voice in deciding who the candidate was in the last presidential election. It was kind of forced down their throats. They were upset. They want to pick who fights for them. So that's what this race is about. It's a primary, and Democrats get to choose who's the fighter for their family, their community, and fight on behalf of them for their country. That's what makes primary so exciting. So you either seek out the party bosses, or you find out what's important to the voters, and you tell them you're the boss.
Well, one thing is very interesting about this campaign in this district is that both contenders for the nomination for the Democratic Party are former Republicans, including yourself and Aaron Gies. And I'm not going to get into the squabble about how long who's been a Democrat, but I want to know if you were a Republican, and I believe you were saying you got disillusioned, for lack of a better word, with the direction that the Republican Party was going, right? That seems accurate. Why would you switch parties instead of just primarying Nick Langworthy?
I love talking about that subject, and I bring it up at every town hall. The professor does not like talking about that subject, and I think it brings up the question to the voters, is this deceitful when you don't talk about your background? Now, Aaron was a Republican up to 2024, very recent. I denounced Donald Trump back in 2015-16. I took on Nick Langworthy when he was the leader of the Republican Party. That would have been about 2012, 2014. If you recall that era, I took on the political party bosses in Albany. There was so much corruption going on. I took on the leadership, not only Nick Langworthy, but of Skelos, Silver, Bruno. If you recall, they all three eventually went to jail. They were all convicted of crimes of government corruption. And so that was way back then. Now, I always talk about, I was a Republican back in 2015, which is over 10 years ago. And the Buffalo News would do articles about me being a maverick, a rebel, because I took on the leadership back then, because what they were doing, in my opinion, was wrong, and it betrayed the voters. So I took on Tonawanda Coke and Amagon Crematory, the city of Buffalo. I took on the Catholic Church to protect children from harm. So I was taking on some very big issues, but I also supported the rights of women. I supported the environment. I supported unions back in those days. I used to put the union logo bug on all my literature because I wanted people to know that I supported hardworking families. I was willing to pay a little bit more money so they could support their families locally. A lot of people bought literature or signs out of state. I did locally to support families locally. So I was considered a rebel back in those days. I don't think I owe anybody an apology of what I stood for back then. My breaking point came when Sheriff Howard and Carl Palladino, who was running for governor of New York way back in 2016, I believe, they were having a pro-Trump rally in front of City Hall of Buffalo. They had the Confederate flags flying. They had the Ku Klux Klan passing out literature at their rally. They did not denounce this behavior. They embraced it. It was at that moment I wrote a letter, got put in the Buffalo News. I left the party. I said, I cannot tolerate this. This is unacceptable behavior, and I denounced it. I denounced the leadership and Donald Trump back then. And the media came to my house to do an interview back then. And I remember I was attacked on social media as being a snowflake. And I laughed into the camera. I said, I don't know what a snowflake is, but I know the difference between right and wrong. I apologize to nobody for what I stood for in those days, and I'm proud of it, and I'll still stand for it.
You had mentioned earlier the party establishment when I had asked about, working with county chairs and whatnot. And just to clarify for myself, would you consider yourself like a rebel within the Democratic Party, running as a rebel in a way?
I don't think
like,
so. I think my values align perfectly with what the Democrat Party believes in, whether it's the rights of women, the environment, hardworking families, supporting unions. I think it fits in line. Now, when people ask me that question, it's another good question you've asked, would you go against leadership? And I bring up as an example, well, we currently see our governor advocating and pushing for nuclear power and data sites. I have done so many different town halls and that I have found out in the southern tier, they don't like the idea of data centers. And I tell people, if I find out, I've heard nuclear power is now safe and new technology. However, if I find out that it's not safe and that if it has a malfunction or if there's a terrorist attack, if it's going to jeopardize communities, and all the nuclear power proposed projects are always around water, I've noticed. So if a community tells me, remember, I've always said, the voter's the boss, not the party bosses, not the governor. But if I find out that that's not safe in their community and they want me to take on leadership, whether it's a governor, whether it's a party boss, I promise you I will do the right thing and I will fight for what the community wants.
I had a list of questions here that I want to ask you, but I also took some questions from the group on Facebook and the social media. I asked anybody have questions. We'll get to those questions in a minute or two. But one question that I ask all candidates, because it's to me a central issue, is healthcare. What's your stance on healthcare? What should be done? What can be done? What needs to be done? Where are you coming from in that area?
I think that is a huge area that needs to be addressed. I thank President Obama and his efforts to get healthcare more affordable. The breach that we talked about, the betrayal, Nick Langworthy supporting Trump's big, beautiful bill, is an abomination. And it's really going to hurt the southern tier. It's going to hurt everybody across the country. And that's the betrayal, to give billionaires tax breaks and then betray the voters, your constituents. That is the issue that's going to be going forward to be addressed in November. I personally don't think our country does a good enough job with health care. I would get rid of the insurance companies. All they do is mark up health care from here up to here to cover profit, CEO salaries, things of that, stockholder dividends, you name it. We should be investing in our country's health. I would advocate for universal health care. I think every mother should have access to tests for their baby to make sure they're healthy and prosper. I think every person that deals with cancer, which would include my father that passed away from cancer, my brother that's had to deal with cancer, everybody should have access to testing so that we can invest in treatment and get people healthy as soon as possible. Instead of what we do now is we push all that off, we let people get cancer, and then sometimes families have to file bankruptcy due to medical care. That is unacceptable. I do believe we're the only developed country in this world that approaches it this way. And if you're going to invest in a country, if you're going to make America great again, then I would stop all the bombings going around the world, all these artificial wars that don't need to be, and I would invest in our country's health care.
Yeah, that's great, because for me, I with this program, my goal is to provide a platform for people to have their voice heard. And I really try not to push my own personal political beliefs in the show, but I will admit that universal health care is one thing I stand firmly for. So we're in agreement on that one. But the challenge is getting there. So getting back to the fact that we have a red district, mostly, and in general, people react to this idea of universal health care as calling it communism or socialism. How do we move from where we are today to actually having systems that the rest of the world has?
Another good question. I'll give you an example. And I was going door to door, and this was a while ago, and I think it was in the Black Rock, Riverside area, and I was coming up to a house, and this was back in 2015, 16, and it had a Trump sign in the window. So I knew this is going to be a challenging conversation. Knocked on the door, a person of color came to the door. And within 20 seconds, I was able to determine that this person had such a handicap, such disabilities, that I knew it wouldn't be possible for this person to hold the job. And we had a conversation. I asked him, why are you a Trump supporter? And I couldn't remember what he said. But in response, I said to him, do you realize that they just gave billionaires tax breaks and they're cutting food stamps in return? And his eyes grew large, and he said, I rely on food stamps. And I said, I know. You're voting against your own best interest, and that's why I'm here to talk to you. And if I'm successful in this Democratic primary, I want to start talking to Republicans and independents that by following this road that Trump and Langworthy are on, this is against your own best interest. And I believe that that's why I embrace my prior Republican background over a decade ago, and I've been a proud Democrat for over 10 years now. I would like to tell them, this is why you need to follow the direction I went in, because this direction is in your best interest, whether it's healthcare, whether it's opportunities, public education, Social Security. Go on and on and on. This is the direction. Now, I believe I can get 35% to crossover of the Republicans and 65% of independents. I believe I can do that. I used to do it the opposite in many years ago. So I am used to communicating with people that might have a different ideology and convincing them this is the way to go.
Great, thank you. That's most of the broad questions I had formulated before we got together. And as I said, I took a few questions online from the Facebook group. And I'll remind everyone listening to please join the Facebook group, like us or subscribe on YouTube, like us on Apple Podcasts. When you join the Facebook group, I encourage people to have a community there and to comment on things. I want to have a constant dialogue going. And in that spirit, I guess last night I announced I'd be interviewing Kevin Stocker today, and I got some questions from voters within the district. Well, the first one was, first of all, do you live in District 23?
I do not. The rules of...
Do you feel that's important?
No. Nick Langworthy has moved into the district. Jack Kemp moved into the district. The rules are, the law is, in order to run for Congress, you have to live as a resident of New York State, which I've been 60 years plus, and Professor Geis has only been 7 years. I have advocated and fought as an attorney in this area for 35 years. I've accomplished some of the most important things. So after winning, the law says you are to move into the district. One of the great things of doing the town halls, I've been all over the southern tier and all over Erie County and into Niagara County, and I'm getting an opportunity to see, okay, in the future, where would I want to move? My thought would be I'd create multiple areas and rotate where I live so that I can interact with people of the area. It's always important for me to listen to what's important to them and their local concerns. And that you can only do that by having dinner there, shopping there, living there, going to the post office, the supermarket. That's where you meet people, you listen to what their concerns are. You can go door to door, listen to what their concerns are. So the law is very simple. You have to be a resident of New York State, and upon being elected, you move into the district, like others before me have.
And another question I got from several people online is related to funding of campaigns. I was on the FEC website this morning, actually, just checking out what the candidates are up to, and I noticed that it seemed anyway that you had loaned your own campaign, your own money, around $60,000. This is what the FEC website said,
right? And
it looked like Aaron Geese has 170-something thousand from individual contributors. If that's roughly accurate, could you explain the difference or why that is?
I tell you, I have a lot of good qualities that I don't really talk about much. one of my bad qualities, I don't like asking people for money. I find it very distasteful. And I know politics, and that's the system. When you start taking money from big special interest groups, you're now owned by them. And I give an example that Aaron donated $25,000 to the State Democratic Committee that was on the FEC filing. Well, is that how you got your endorsements, I would ask? So I take people have donated small amounts to me, and I write personal thank you notes when they do. I don't openly and actively push for donations because I find it personally difficult to do and distasteful. Probably how I was raised as a child, not asking and doing everything yourself. So yeah, I do principally fund my own campaign.
You had mentioned endorsements, and by the way, we only have a few minutes left here, so I only got a couple questions left. But
that's okay.
You had mentioned endorsements, and I'm wondering, I think there are like 9 counties maybe throughout the district. I believe there are 9,
right.
Maybe 10. And I'm wondering, how are you doing on that end with the endorsements, county chairs and stuff like that, or other groups within?
In this particular race, I indicated earlier, half the party bosses are smart. Half of them listened to Democrat voters who wanted their voice heard and they wanted to pick. The other half, they want to dictate who's the candidate. So I have sent out a comparison piece to voters. They can compare candidates, and on June 23rd, and early voting starts June 13th, they get to exercise their power and vote for who they want.
Great. And speaking of endorsements, the primary, again, is June 23rd, which is only, we're recording this on May 18th, so by the time people hear this, we're going to be about 30 days away from the primary. On the endorsement end, let's just say, for fiction's sake, that Aaron Gies wins the primary. Would you endorse Aaron Gies for Congress if you do not win this primary?
We have both publicly made declarations that whoever wins, the other person would support them. And I would do nothing to help the Trump Langworthy ticket to help win that. So I would anticipate that if I win the Democrat primary, which looks very good right now, that Aaron would join me and I would welcome his help and efforts. And sometimes primaries can be somewhat bruising and egos can be damaged or bruised to some extent. The idea is to come together at the end and what's best for the District 23.
And in closing, I'll ask you the same question I ask all my guests. My goal here is to give candidates a platform for them to have their say. And so without me asking a pointed question, is there something you'd want to add? You've got like a minute to say whatever you'd like. And this is kind of the closing words, I suppose. What do you...
Well, I would say that I'm a fighter. I think Nick Langworthy is afraid of taking me on. He knows me personally. He knows how hard I work. He knows I'm going to drop the gloves and swing hard. I know he's already done polling in the southern tier involving me and him. So he's concerned already about the race. The voters, upon selecting me and voting for me, they're going to get somebody that's going to give their blood, sweat, and tears. I'm going to give it all I got. I want to defeat Trump and turn this, and Langworthy, turn this ship 180 degrees. I want to stop the wars, stop the tariffs, help people with their costs of living. I want people to be proud of what it means to be an American. When you threaten Canada, Argentina, Mexico, Cuba, Iran, Greenland, Argentina, Venezuela is the one I was thinking about and forgetting. This is not what America stands for. We're to provide leadership and peace in the world. To be a decent American means to help those less fortunate here in this country and around the world. This administration is an embarrassment to what this country represents. Nick Langworthy has betrayed, especially Republicans, but every voter in his district by passing that big, beautiful bill, giving billionaires tax breaks, cutting food stamps for the poor, hurting people when it comes to health care, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. You can count on me to fight to do everything the exact opposite and help hardworking families. I want to give people opportunities in the southern tier. I want to help that internet. I want to help healthcare down there. And if they don't want data centers, I will fight to keep data centers out there. And that's how I'd like to close today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. There you have it, people. That's Kevin Stocker, the Democratic candidate for Congress in New York's District 23. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you luck on the campaign. And we got a month left between now and the primary, so it's likely that I'll have both you and Aaron Gies on again at some point between now and the primary to kind of drill down a little more on the issues. Today was more of a get to know you kind of thing, I felt, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
No problem. I appreciate the opportunity.
And stay tuned for joining us next time. In the next week or so, I'll be bringing other episodes with other activists and voters, special interest groups that are within the district, as well as other candidates in other districts. So please join us on Facebook, join the group, be part of the discussion, subscribe to us on YouTube, like us in Apple Podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you next time. I'm Don Baisley. I'm not running for Congress.